afternoon, everybody. You know what it's like when in a gathering like this, somebody says, I'm very happy to be here," and nobody really believes them. But I hope you believe me when I say that, because I really am truly very happy to be here today. There are three reasons why I am here today, and give me some time, like 30 seconds, to explain why. The first reason is, when Joey Concepcion asks you to moderate a session in a summit like this, you say, yes, of course. The second reason, and I'm not biased when I say this, is someone who's very involved in Go Negosyo and the Mentor Me program. My sister, Gingay Hontiveros Malvar, maybe some of you are familiar with her, and she's here today. And the third reason is, I too believe in prosperity for all, in being a kapatid and a mentor. This is about empowering people, engaging them, including, not excluding people, being family, being a brother or a sister or a kapatid, bringing people along, taking them by the hand, not leaving anyone behind, mentoring, which is in a way stewardship. But being inclusive means giving people the capacity to do business and to enable them. Our speakers in this session, where is the funding, opening up innovative and inclusive financing options for micro and small entrepreneurs, have prepared very compelling, engaging, and hopefully earth-shaking presentations that will either wake you up or keep you awake in challenging times such as these, which is the hour after lunch hour. And you will know what I mean, because I'm sure some of you are quite sleepy at the moment. And while you listen, please think of questions that you would like to ask, so that later, when I open up the floor for questions to the audience, some of you may want to participate. So let's begin with Mr. Alex Buenaventura, President of Landbank Philippines. He will tell us how Landbank champions financial inclusion, and will share with us an innovation to fast-track things. In other words, he's going to make some very big promises, which we all hope he can keep. Mr. Buenaventura, sir.
Thank you, Pia. Financial inclusion for Landbank means bringing back access of small farmers to financing or loans from Landbank. Next slide, please.
We're going to be bringing up Mr. Buenaventura's presentation in a bit. Can we put it up on screen?
As I said,
there, okay.
Let me repeat. Financial inclusion in the countryside for Landbank means bringing back access of written-off small farmers from Landbank loans. Because in the past, 1.87 billion of loans to small farmers in the last 10 years were written off by Landbank. Farmers' cooperative loans in the last 10 years, 1.87 billion were written off by Landbank. And more than 80% of the borrowers, farmers' cooperatives, 80%, more than 80% were written off by Landbank over the last 10 years. The problem, therefore, is of financial inclusion is access. How do we bring back access of these written-off farmers back to land bank lending programs? Next slide, please. When I took office, I accepted it because I am challenged by this problem of farmers no longer having access to land bank financing. Because right now, there are many programs of land bank, but access to them is restricted by the requirement that your farmers' cooperatives must have 3 years profitable financial operations. So my challenge during my incumbency in Land Bank in the next 2 years is to grow lending to the small farmers by 200% by the end of the term of President Duterte, by 2022. Next slide, please. Our strategy is, in addition to the existing difficult access of cooperatives applying loans to Land Bank, which is going to be maintained, we will introduce a corporate lending program. All right, so we have to introduce a new approach, and this is corporate. All right. It's now corporate. All right. It's a new program which is a corporate program. Next slide, please. The corporate lending program, by the way, in Land Bank we call it corporative lending program, is a hybrid of cooperatives and corporates. It is 49% partnership, 49% individual farmers, 51% by big agribusiness. So it's a joint venture corporation. We will wish to create joint venture corporations, 49% owned by individual farmers who will sign individual farm management agreements with the joint venture corporation, and 51% owned by a big agribusiness group who will manage the entire operations. Next slide, please. What's the role of Land Bank? The role of Land Bank is to consolidate land. We will be identifying land, and most of these are the agrarian reform beneficiaries' land who have been written off by Land Bank. And we will negotiate with a big processing company to be their joint venture partner. And we will assist in the incorporation of this joint venture corporation. And Land Bank will lend big loans, big corporate loans to this joint venture corporation. Next slide, please. The role of the small farmers is to sign an individual farm management agreement with the joint venture company and enjoy the following benefits. They will be employed. They will have regular employment. Second, they will have a share of the income of the joint venture corporation. And then they'll be entitled to buy 49% of the shares of the corporation every harvest. Next slide, please. Roles of the big processing company is to manage the operations of the plantation type production to finished product processing company. So I want to emphasize that the small farmers will no longer manage their farms. They will no longer borrow the money to produce. It's now the joint venture corporation who will manage the farms. All right. And borrow money from Landbank and from other banks. And the big business company to put up capital, provide big capital to this company. Because, you know, a big capital is needed because this is not only a production, it will involve a finished product processing plant and equipment. And then to allow a big part of the allowable dividends to be shared by the farmers pro rata according to their land area contribution. And to give employment to the participating farmers. Next slide, please. Just to give you an idea, we have already 3 pipeline projects. We have identified 3, because the start of this program is to identify many beneficiaries. We have talked to MILF Chairman Murad, one of the Muslim groups in Mindanao, and they have 8,000 hectares, and we're processing that particular area for a joint venture corporation. There is a 1,000 hectare to coffee cooperative. They are agrarian reform in Sulu, right? So these 2 areas are good components, development components for the peace process in Mindanao. Then there's one rice group in Mindoro. And there are other areas that we would be going into. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Buenaventura. Tell us more about this cooperative, this what you call a hybrid between the corporation and the cooperative. In terms of laws, the legal framework, we're all set. Ganun po ba yun? And what else is needed so that this becomes a reality?
There are no legal impediments because this is creating a corporation. That's one. Second, in terms of land bank lending to corporations, land bank is very, very happy to lend to big corporations, big amounts. So we don't have a problem with land bank lending to big corporations. So I just wanted to mention to you that there is this funding. 325 billion is non-compliant amount bank-wide to the Agri-Agra law. And we have that funding source. Every time we create a corporation, a joint venture corporation, we could issue special land bank bonds compliant to Agri-Agra law. So we don't have any funding problem. So we have 325 billion. All commercial banks and all banks in this country would rather pay 0.5% penalty than comply with the Agri-Agra law because you know, they know that it's so risky to lend to small farmers. But this one will be compliant. Mm-hmm. So we have okay. In fact, under existing laws, a very big funding source behind this program.
So you talked about 3 projects in the pipeline earlier. You mentioned them, and you said there are many others.
Yeah, because
can you give us more clues
there are many agrarian reform areas in this country, mm-hmm. and those are just the tip of the iceberg. uh, marami. There are so many blacklisted farmers, agrarian reform beneficiaries from the negative. They're in the negative list now of Landbank, so they don't have access anymore to Landbank loans. So this is quite a big program, Pia.
All right, thank you, Mr. Alex Buenaventura. Let's listen now to Dr. Raymond KWONG. He's the Chief Executive Officer and Group Managing Director of Silverlake Axis since 2005. Dr. KWONG.
Thank you. I'll try to keep all of you awake without slides. Yeah. Maybe I just, on top of what's been said, in a more Philippines perspective, to give an ASEAN perspective. I think the elephant in the room we are all addressing on inclusive financing for ASEAN micro SMEs is best highlighted by two big data observations that I have. Number one, MSMEs, micro SMEs, today account for more than 80% of ASEAN commercial enterprises. 80% of commercial enterprise in ASEAN are MSMEs. But yet, over 80% of them, and in some statistics says that maybe even up to 90% of them do not have access to fair and affordable financing through traditional banking channels. So it's a big anomaly that's happening here. And my hypothesis is that if the MSME sector have access to easy and affordable financing, they will be able to increase their contribution to GDP from 25 to 50%. So just look at the statistics. 80% of all commercial enterprises are MSMEs. They don't have access to affordable financing. Today, they're only contributing 25% of GDP. I predict that if they have access to financing, affordable financing, and the supply chain, they are able to increase their contribution of GDP to 50% within a period of 8 to 10 years. So by the time we celebrate the 60th anniversary of ASEAN, hope this trend will change.
60th anniversary, so we wait 10 years.
Yeah.
10 years.
But for this to happen, I think two things must happen. One, easy and affordable access to digital logistic and finance network. And this is key to increasing the prosperity of the SMEs. So a lot of governments and also private enterprise are starting to invest in putting logistics and financial networks in place that are affordable and easily accessible. So it's very important infrastructure. As important as physical infrastructure, these virtual infrastructures need to be implemented very quickly. The other thing that's happening very rapidly is that all our industries, whether you're talking about retail, logistics, financial, are being disrupted by technology. Low cost, affordable technology is going to disrupt the supply chain, disrupt the financial services industry, to increase access and to grow the network in a cost-effective manner. So it's very important that technology inclusion is part of the equation as well.
Dr. KWONG, can you tell us a little bit more about how exactly will MSMEs benefit from the financial integration in ASEAN?
One aspect is, one of the biggest difficulty MSME have is that they don't have a credit score. Once they don't have a credit score, they can't get a loan from a bank, traditional bank. I believe digitization of the micro SMEs will allow us to have all the SMEs within ASEAN to have a dynamic credit score. You score the merchants, the SMEs with a credit score, and the best credit score for them is understanding their transactions, the transactions that they undertake day by day, the customers that are using and buying their services. from those big data statistics, you can give a credit score to all and every micro SMEs. So with that score, a peer-to-peer lending platform, for instance, could originate loans for them, and the traditional banks can securitize the loans at a very affordable interest rates to the MSMEs. So that's one trend. In other words, to give a dynamic credit score to every micro SMEs that we have in ASEAN. That's one big item. And of course, secondly, through mobile technology, for them to access the data as well as the whole application process for getting loans and also disbursements of loans.
Dr. Raymond Kwong, thank you very much. Let's go now to Dr. Jaime ALIP, who is founder and managing director of the Center for Agriculture and Rural Development Mutually Reinforcing Institutions, CARD MRI, sir.
Thank you, Pia. I just want to say what's in my heart. I'm a practitioner. I'm not used to this kind of audience, big business. I'm more of a micro-entrepreneur. Let me tell you about the story of CARD. What about how we relate with inclusive business? CARD was established in 1986. I started this with 20 pesos and a magic typewriter. I was very young and very handsome at that time.
You still are, sir.
I'm 60 years old now, retired as an executive, but still the group chair.
And that is your typewriter, the original one.
Yes. And my ambition, my vision is to establish a bank that is owned and managed by the poor in this country. Because at that time, it was very, very difficult or next to impossible to borrow a loan by the poor people in this country. You need collateral. You need feasibility study. So my vision is to have a bank that will turn the traditional banking system upside down. When the traditional bank wants collateral, I ask for no collateral. When they ask for kilos and kilos of documents, feasibility studies, so to speak, I don't ask. I only need one page. Where traditional bank, where the clients go to the traditional bank's doorstep, I bring our bank right at the footstep in the countryside. So today, the next slide, please. Out of that ambition for 30 years, today we're now a group of 19 mutually reinforcing institutions. And the 1914, and then this institution, we own now 3 banks, 3 insurance company. We have our own 2 finance company. We also have our own boutique, our own pharmacy. We also have our own IT. We also have our own marketing company and establishing our own hospital. Because when you're dealing with the poor, you're not talking of financing alone. When you're dealing with inclusive growth, you need to look at who your target are. So you're talking not only of financing, you need to look at also the market, how you can help the market. And you need to help them also in the health and education program. We also have established our own college that offers degree program in microfinance and microinsurance. And by the way, my thesis is, it is not only access that you give to the poor when you talk of inclusive growth. It's also giving them control of resources. We are the first microfinance bank in this country that is substantially owned by the members. We are the first microinsurance company in this country that is owned 100% by the poor in this country, and I'm very proud of that. Even all our institutions are mostly owned by our members. Next slide, please. In the next slide that I show, this is what we do in the financials. We have microfinance, microinsurance, and this is the figures that I have now. Today, we now is able to assist 4.3 million Filipino families in this country. Translation, this is 20% of, oh, you may clap. You're clapping for our clients. By the way, our clients are mostly women. I don't give mostly loan to the men. Sorry about that. So we have 4.3 million families that we're assisting. This is about 20% of the entire population of the country. We are also the biggest in terms of microinsurance, in terms of outreach, which, with about 14 million Filipino lives that we're insuring. And I started this company. I was the only staff. I was the janitor. I was the messenger, the typist with the typewriter. Today, we have 12,500 full-time command staff. And further than that, we have our own clinics servicing more than 3 million families, poor families in this country, right there at the far-flung areas with our own generic Butika store. And if I may also show you the next slide. This is the map of the Philippines. We're covering the entire archipelago of the Philippines, covering around 94% of the entire municipalities in this country, 96% of the entire barangay in this country. We are in the last frontier of the country, which is in Tawi-Tawi, Sitangkay. This is about 30 minutes away by Pamboat, you're already in Malaysia. 45 minutes in Balut Island, you're already in Indonesia. And to truly say that we are countrywide, we're also in Batanes, where you can hear the tilaok of the manok of the Taiwanese. And we have also expanded PIA in other countries in Southeast Asia. We're present in Myanmar. We're present in Vietnam. We're present in Laos, Cambodia, also in Indonesia, and in Hong Kong to work with our OFWs. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Dr. Alip. Sabi niyo po kanina, hindi kayo sanay. You're not used to, big forums like these with big businessmen. And yet, your speech so far, the most applauded. Bakit kaya?
I get most applaud from the women because I give loans only to the women. And by the way, for the past 30 years, our repayment rate has been near perfect at 99.59%.
Wow. Maybe the Landbank should take some tips from you.
In fairness with Landbank, I'm the biggest borrower of Landbank. And help them
The
retain
biggest
it.
borrower, and you repay. You pay the loan.
Oh, yes, we pay
Oh,
100%.
naman.
We
Oh,
always
naman.
win their award for...
But what were you, Dr. Alip, would you mind if I ask you what you were thinking when Mr. Buenaventura was talking about the corporative?
Actually, Alex and I date back many, many years ago when I was at the government sector and he was at the private sector. So I know his corporate model. I was also inspired by that. Now he's in the government, now I'm in the private sector. So I think we can work together because this is the vision that I have. But for me, it's always important not only to give access, whether you're talking of finance or market, it's important to give control of these resources. So that's why I like the corporative concept because you bring ownership concept to the clients. And this is also what I do with my compadre here, Bernil Yu. So we're working together with PenShop under our corporation, Likhani and I, wherein he's sitting in our board and helping us. So I think this is the kind of concept that we'd like to do. So I will support him.
Thank you, Dr. Alip. Kung hindi pa tayo nagising dyan, ewan ko na. Okay, next to speak, and we only have about 20 minutes to go before the end of this session, is JOJO FLORES, co-founder of Plug and Play Tech Center. It's a Silicon Valley-based technology startup accelerator, which he started back in 2006. And I love your PowerPoint, by the way, JOJO, made for young people, the millennials and the plurals, like those of us here in the audience, that are millennials. So please go ahead.
Thanks, Pia, and warm welcome to our guests from our neighbors in the ASEAN. Yeah, can we go to the next slide? Okay, just a little story. We're businessmen that actually we're not engineers, we're not in tech. We just happened to stumble onto this whole acceleration business for tech startups in Silicon Valley. We did have this little building that was very interesting in Palo Alto, and it was in along University Avenue. And it's very interesting because this is where Google started, this was where PayPal started, this was where Logitech started, and a number of other big companies now, presently. But then, they were just startups, no? And it gave us a very unique perspective into the tech startup business, which we really didn't understand. But we were very lucky enough to get the chance or the opportunity to invest in some of these companies like PayPal and Google. So we were one of the very early investors of Google's, and you call them angels now, right? And after a few years of operations, we said, and actually during this time, I was doing another business, another brick and mortar business for our group in Europe. But when I came back in 2005, Saeed, who's actually I'm more handsome because he's not here, I can say that. Okay, but when he's around, I say that he's more handsome. But that gentleman of there, so when I came back, I said, so how's the startup scene coming along? And he said, that's actually, this was 2005, the bubble had just burst. And he said, it's actually starting to pick up again. So I said, why don't we buy a bigger building and scale this present little 2,000 square foot space that we had where that was the original space. And so he said, yeah, okay, let's go buy a bigger building and cut it up into smaller pieces and that we can offer to startups. So that's what I did. So every weekend I drive around Silicon Valley, the Bay Area, and I found this building that was owned by Philips Semiconductors that they had abandoned because they didn't do any more fabrication of chips then.
Which building is it, Jojo?
The one down here.
Okay.
Okay. So it's from 2,000 we scaled to 175,000 square feet. So that's about 17,000 square meters. And we said, okay, let's scale this baby up. And so today, at any given time, I have hundreds of startups now in this particular building. But still, keeping up with the spirit of let's host startups in our space and see who are the most interesting ones, and let's invest in them. So next slide, please. So today, this is where we are. No? So from 2006 up, so just over 10 years, today we've accelerated over 2,000 startups. At any given time, I have 400 companies at Plug and Play. This is about 700, 800 people. Half of these people are from outside of the United States. I mean, or they have foreign descent. Okay, very interesting fact. About, I would say 200 or 300 of them have PhD degrees in engineering. Really smart people, all right? So they walk around the building in barefoot, you know. You know they're smart when they can walk around barefoot, all right? And I ask, who's this guy? Oh, they're doing this technology, blah, 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 blah. Of course, everything goes over my head. And then I ask, is it good that we put in money in them? So we really like to see, because it gives us a chance to see them alive and operating, you know, like even in the old building with Larry and Sergey, we saw them. We became friends with Larry and Sergey. With Peter Thiel at PayPal, we became friends with him. So in this case, we're scaling the whole story. It's the 8,000 figure, 8,000. We go through right now at least 8,000. Actually, it's more like 10,000 startups a year that we look at in terms of deal flow globally. I think this is the next important or significant figure is $3.5 billion, which is the amount of money that has been invested in the community of startups that we have. So, okay, for this session, we say, where's the funding? I think the funding is everywhere. Even here in ASEAN, there's a lot of money, okay? But we just need to give them a comfortable platform where they can invest that money, right? And I think what we have created at Plug and Play is a very comfortable investment platform for would-be investors. So if they see smart people, you'll be comfortable investing in a smart person. If you see 300 large corporations that if they say, okay, this startup is working for Mercedes-Benz, this startup is working for Johnson & Johnson, this startup is working for Procter & Gamble, then it gives you more comfort level to invest. 160 venture partners, so they're not alone. If you're an angel, if they see that there are co-investors for this particular deal, then you feel more comfortable. If they see that if these are companies coming out from universities, so I'm not a doctor, I'm not an engineer, I'm not a technology person, so I need to depend on really smart people at the universities to tell me that this is a good deal. So it gives me, again, comfort in investing. So these are very important figures, I think. And of course, it didn't happen overnight. We had to develop the whole ecosystem and the whole community around the startups so that investors and other strategic partners would get involved with the startups. Next slide, please. So I don't want to say that I've invented something at Plug and Play. At Plug and Play, I like to say that it's Silicon Valley in a box. So it's something that is just a microcosm of what's happening. So that has been a successful model because all of the components of that ecosystem is already there. But maybe I should mention that we've actually expanded globally, and we're now present in 20 locations all around the world, including here in the Philippines, in Singapore, and in Jakarta, in Indonesia. So we've had really very great success stories. After PayPal and after Google, we did see a company called Dropbox back in 2006 or 2007. When we invested in the company was worth less than $5 million in valuation. When we exited, the company was worth $10 billion. Okay, so yeah, we can clap. Also, yeah, we've been lucky with Dropbox. There's also a company called Lending Club that is also a unicorn or $1 billion company that went IPO 2 years ago. So we've had some really good hits and home runs through Plug and Play, and I think if we can set up the same kind of platform here in the ASEAN context, then funding will surely, pour in. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jojo Flores. Jojo, serious question. There's a ballroom full of people with shoes on. Should we take our shoes off too?
And again, this is Silicon Valley context,
Yeah, okay. We have about 11 minutes to go, and I wanted to, instead of doing a Q&A, more Q&A here, earlier on I said if you have any questions, maybe you'd like to ask them now. If not, we're going to close that portion, and we'll go straight into final words of each of our panelists, just to give them enough time to wrap things up for us. So let's begin with Mr. Buenaventura. Final words, sir.
I would wish that the big agribusinessmen in this country, as well as in other countries in ASEAN, to become the joint venture partners of our small farmers in our program to create joint venture corporations in this country. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Kwong, final words?
Yeah, just a point that I want to emphasize that every industry is being disrupted by technology, as mentioned earlier on. So I think it's very important, for inclusion, financial inclusion for everybody in the whole economy and the whole of ASEAN to benefit, is to get how to get everybody to participate in that disruption. So one of the first step is collaboration. Collaboration between a traditional bank, a startup, infrastructure company, a telco. So all these industries are being disrupted. Why not get everybody together, to disrupt things together for the benefit of everybody? Because otherwise, you end up, the gap between the rich and poor will go even bigger and bigger, because technology phenomena is like that. The winner takes all. But we want to make everybody a winner. So we need to get the MSMEs to be collaborative with all the other industries that have the technology capabilities as well. So it's very important to get into a collaboration, and the MSMEs must be included in that collaboration. Otherwise, there will only be very few winners, and there's not going to be an issue of a gap between the rich and the poor, even in the commercial enterprise. So it's very important to participate in that collaboration. However small we are in whichever sector, technology can be used to disrupt the whole industry.
Thank you, Dr. Kwong. Before we go to Dr. Alip, I just like to acknowledge the presence of Secretary Martin Andanar and Secretary De La Peña and Mr. Manny Pangilinan. They're up here up front. Thanks for being here, sirs. Dr. Alip, final words, sir?
I just want to send a message that CARD MRI, as a group of mutually reinforcing institutions, is not in the business of financing per se. We are in the business of poverty eradication. We want total eradication in this country. That is why our group of mutually reinforcing institutions is not only having banks, insurance companies, we're now also having our own hospital. Of course, we will not compete with you, Mr. Pangilinan. And we're very thankful to BDO also because of the loans that you're giving us, and of course, PPI and a number of institutions here. But those institutions who still have, especially the banks who still have money, I will borrow from you, and I will have 100% repayment.
Thank you, Dr. Alip. JOJO, Flores.
Yeah, hi. As a businessman, I always like to say why. I'll ask why. Why am I doing something? And even this advocacy of promoting tech startup ecosystems, not only in the Philippines, but in the ASEAN region. For perspective purposes, there was a study that was done by MIT, by Kauffman Foundation on MIT back in 2009 on all of the companies that were started by their alumni, okay, over a 30-year period. And this is what they found out as summary, that over those 30 years, 26,000 companies were created, okay? And these were tech companies, okay? 26,000 companies were created, employing 3 million people, okay? With an aggregate revenue of $2 trillion a year. And if it was an economy on its own, would be the 11th largest economy in the world. Okay, this came from just one school in the United States. Imagine what a country can do. Imagine what ASEAN nations can do if we put ourselves, in that mindset of what is the next big thing that can make us globally competitive. And quickly, because tech, things happen in just 10 years. Google became a $10 billion company in just 10 years. Airbnb overtook all of the biggest hotels in the world in just less than 10 years. It can be done with tech more than any other industry. That's why I think we should really focus on this one and give it urgency, as a nation, as a private individual, as a corporation, or as a government. And if I may, Pia, we do have startups here in the room. okay, here in the Philippines. You know,
Name them, name
Jopin,
them.
Jopin, are you here? You know, she has a startup called Magpie.
Where's
We have
Jopin?
Dennis, he has a startup called Mover. Isa, I saw Isa here. She has a startup called Salt. You know, these guys can be, you know, $100 million companies, you know. We just gotta believe in them, and they're really smart people, much smarter than I am. So thank you very much for having us.
And thank you very much also to JOJO Flores. You know, as a moderator, it is my job to wrap things up at the end of a session, but I don't think I can match their words, you know, the words of our very distinguished speakers today. So all I will say is amen. And that's because the session 5 is initiating the ASEAN Mentorship for Entrepreneurs Network, which is amen. So amen to what they say, amen to everything here. And thank you very much to our guests, our speakers today, Mr. Buenaventura, thank you, sir. Dr. ALIP, thank you, sir. Dr. KWONG, thank you. And Mr. JOJO Flores. Maraming salamat